A fast food restaurant that was once a part of everyday American life is now making headlines for all the wrong reasons. The counter that millions of people trusted every single day, the drive-through line that never seemed to slow down, and the kitchen behind that counter that most customers never saw and never thought to question. Across the country, something is quietly happening inside some of America's most recognizable fast food chains. And today we are looking at 12 of them you should never eat at, and the 4 that are actually safe. Subway has more locations in the United States than any other fast food chain in the country. At its peak, it operated more than 21,000 American locations, and for years, it marketed itself as the healthy alternative to every other name on this list. The fresh bread, the vegetables lined up behind the glass. The idea that you were making a better choice by walking through that door. But the inspection records tell a very different story. Health departments across the country have cited Subway locations for some of the most serious violations in the fast food industry: rodent activity, improper food storage temperatures, employee hygiene failures. In New York City alone, Subway locations were shut down more than 50 times over a single inspection period for violations serious enough to warrant immediate closure. The problems were never isolated to one city or one region. They showed up in Atlanta, in Chicago, in Las Vegas, in markets across the country where the same brand name sat above the door, but the standards inside varied wildly from one location to the next. The fresh image that Subway spent decades building in its advertising had very little to do with what health inspectors were actually finding when they showed up unannounced. Popeyes built its reputation on one thing, and built it extremely well: the fried chicken. The particular crunch of that batter and the particular heat of the Louisiana seasoning became genuinely beloved by millions of American customers who would drive past 3 other fast food restaurants just to get to a Popeyes. But behind the reputation for great chicken, there is a documented record of health inspection failures that spans multiple states and multiple years. In Atlanta, a location failed inspection with serious violations after inspectors found food being stored at dangerously unsafe temperatures, while stagnant water covered the kitchen floor. Management asked the reporter who came to ask about it to leave. In Colorado Springs, a single location failed inspection 3 consecutive times for dirty equipment and improperly held food. In Detroit, an employee recorded video inside a Popeye's kitchen showing conditions that triggered an inspection, which then found insects in the food, plumbing failures, and improper storage across the board. In New York City, Popeyes earned the distinction of being one of only 2 chains in the entire survey to have locations shut down completely for critical violations including mice, evidence of mice, flies, and unsanitized food contact surfaces. One location alone accumulated 75 violation points before inspectors closed it. Jack in the Box has more than 2,200 locations across the United States, and for most people driving past one today, it looks like any other fast food chain on any other corner. But Jack in the Box carries a history that no amount of rebranding has ever fully erased. In 1993, an E. coli outbreak tied directly to undercooked beef patties at locations across 4 states killed 4 children and sent more than 700 people to the hospital. It remains one of the deadliest foodborne illness outbreaks in American fast food history. The investigation that followed exposed failures at every level of the operation, from supplier oversight to kitchen temperature protocols to the basic handling of food that was being served to families every single day. The company paid out millions in settlements. New food safety regulations were written specifically in response to what happened, and the 4 children who died never got to grow up. What makes the Jack in the Box story impossible to simply move past is that it did not happen in secret. The beef was undercooked. The temperatures were wrong. The warnings existed and were not acted on in time. Decades later, the chain still operates thousands of locations and still serves millions of customers every week. But the violations that have continued to surface across multiple states in the years since suggest that the lessons of 1993 were never fully absorbed into the culture of how this company operates at the ground level. There is a version of the Jack in the Box story where everything changed after 1993, where the tragedy became the turning point that made this chain the safest operation in the industry. That version exists in the press releases and the corporate statements. The inspection records that health departments have quietly been filing across the country for the 30 years since tell a more complicated story. The 1993 outbreak did not just damage a brand, it killed children. And a chain that carries that history into every new location it opens carries a weight that a new logo and a drive-through app cannot make disappear. Sonic Drive-In has more than 3,500 locations across the United States, and its entire identity is built around a particular kind of American nostalgia. The car hop, the skating server, the cherry limeade sweating in a cup on a hot afternoon. Sonic has spent decades selling that image and selling it effectively to millions of customers who associate the brand with something warm and genuinely American. But the reality inside the kitchens behind that carefully constructed image has told a different story for years. Health departments across multiple states have found mold growing inside ice machines at Sonic locations, cockroaches in kitchen areas, insects discovered inside ice cream equipment, leaking ceilings dripping directly onto food preparation surfaces. In multiple markets, the violations were not minor issues that any busy kitchen might occasionally accumulate. They were the kind of findings that indicate something deeper and more systemic about how cleanliness is being prioritized and monitored at the location level. What makes the Sonic situation particularly worth paying attention to is the nature of the format itself. Sonic locations operate with food being prepared and held across a wide range of stations and equipment that all require consistent maintenance and monitoring to stay safe. When that monitoring breaks down, the results show up in inspection reports that describe conditions most customers would find genuinely alarming if they knew about them before pulling into the stall and ordering. The gap between the nostalgic American image Sonic has spent decades building in its advertising and what health inspectors have repeatedly found when they showed up unannounced is one of the largest of any chain on this list. Most people who pull into a Sonic on a summer afternoon are thinking about the drink they are about to order. They are not thinking about the last time someone checked the ice machine. After reading what those inspections have actually found, it becomes very difficult to think about one without thinking about the other. Burger King has more than 7,000 locations across the United States, and a marketing history that has spent decades positioning itself as the home of the flame-grilled burger and the direct rival to every other major chain in the country. The Whopper, the have it your way promise. The brand identity that has been one of the most recognizable in American fast food for more than half a century. But the inspection findings that have accumulated across those thousands of locations include some of the most specific and troubling conditions of any major chain currently operating in the country. A single location in Virginia was cited for 14 separate critical violations in one inspection visit alone. Employees not washing hands, uncovered food sitting in refrigerators, grime accumulation across multiple kitchen surfaces. In Georgia, a location failed outright after inspectors found a dead roach and expired food throughout the kitchen. In 2026, a health inspection of the employee cafeteria inside Burger King's own corporate headquarters found black and green mold growing in the ice machine, living and dead roaches across the kitchen, and significant buildup on equipment surfaces. The cafeteria was shut down. When the people running a chain of thousands of restaurants cannot maintain basic sanitary standards inside their own office building, the question of what is happening inside individual franchise locations across the country becomes considerably harder to answer with confidence. The flame-grilled image is real in the sense that the cooking method exists. But an image is exactly what it is: what happens in the kitchen before the patty ever reaches the grill, how the surfaces are cleaned, how the equipment is maintained, how seriously individual franchise owners take the standards that corporate sets from a distance. None of that shows up in the advertising. It shows up in the inspection reports. And what those reports have been showing up for years is a chain that looks very different from the outside than it does when someone with a clipboard shows up unannounced and starts opening doors. Wendy's has built its entire modern identity around a kind of sharp, confident humor that has made it one of the most talked about brands on social media for years. The Twitter comebacks, the fresh, never frozen beef promise, the Frosty that has been a genuine American comfort food institution for decades. Wendy's knows exactly what its image is, and it has spent considerable money and creativity making sure that image stays sharp and current in a way that most fast food chains have never managed. But the inspection record behind that image has accumulated findings that sit in uncomfortable contrast with the confidence the brand projects publicly. A single Las Vegas location racked up 27 health demerits in one inspection visit. Across the country, Wendy's locations have been cited for violations involving improper food temperatures, unsanitary food contact surfaces, pest activity, and employee hygiene failures that inspectors flagged as serious enough to require immediate correction. The fresh, never frozen beef promise is a genuine differentiator, and it is one that has held up as a factual claim about the product. But fresh beef handled incorrectly is actually more dangerous than frozen beef handled correctly, because fresh product that is improperly stored or held at the wrong temperature creates conditions for bacterial growth that frozen product simply does not. The promise of fresh beef only means something if the kitchen maintaining that beef is operating at a standard that protects the customer at every step between delivery and the moment the food reaches the tray. What the inspection records suggest is that for a meaningful number of Wendy's locations across the country, that standard has not always been consistently met. The social media persona is genuinely entertaining. The Frosty is genuinely good. But the gap between the brand Wendy's has built online and the conditions that health inspectors have found in its kitchens is worth knowing about before you decide the fresh, never-frozen promise is enough of a reason to feel confident about what you are actually eating. Chipotle spent years positioning itself as the fast food chain for people who had outgrown fast food. The responsibly sourced ingredients, the open kitchen where customers could watch their food being made, the carefully cultivated image of a brand that cared more about what went into its food than any of the legacy chains it was quietly replacing in the habits of millions of American customers. For a long time, that positioning worked extraordinarily well. Chipotle grew into one of the most valuable restaurant companies in the country and built a loyal customer base that genuinely believed they were making a better choice by choosing Chipotle over the alternatives. Then the outbreaks started. Norovirus outbreaks hit multiple locations across multiple states. An E. coli outbreak sickened customers across 11 states and triggered a federal investigation. A salmonella outbreak hit Minnesota. Another norovirus outbreak in Virginia sickened more than 140 people in a single incident. The pattern was not a series of isolated incidents at poorly run franchise locations. Chipotle is not a franchise operation. Every location is corporate-owned and corporate-managed, which means the failures that produced those outbreaks were systemic failures in the way the company was operating across its entire network. The open kitchen that had been one of Chipotle's most powerful marketing tools became a liability when customers started understanding what open kitchen actually meant in terms of cross-contamination risk. The fresh ingredients that had defined the brand's identity were the same ingredients that health investigators kept finding at the center of each new outbreak. Chipotle has invested heavily in food safety protocols since the wave of outbreaks that damaged its reputation in the mid-2010s, and the company has made genuine operational changes in the years since. But the record of what happened stands. And for a brand that built its entire identity on being better than the competition, the distance between that promise and what those outbreaks revealed about how the kitchens were actually operating is not something that a new food safety initiative fully closes. Dunkin has more than 9,500 locations across the United States, making it one of the most physically present food brands in the country, particularly in the Northeast, where a Dunkin on every block is less a joke and more an accurate description of certain neighborhoods. The coffee, the donuts, the breakfast sandwich grabbed on the way to work by millions of Americans who have built their morning routines around a brand they have never once thought to question. Dunkin is so embedded in the daily habits of so many people that it barely registers as a choice anymore. It is simply part of the morning. But health inspection records across multiple states have revealed a pattern of sanitation failures at Dunkin locations that sit in stark contrast with the cheerful familiarity the brand projects. Inspectors have found mold in coffee and beverage equipment at multiple locations, pest activity in storage and food preparation areas, improper food holding temperatures on items that sit behind the counter through an entire shift, employee hygiene violations flagged as serious enough to require immediate corrective action. The volume of locations Dunkin operates creates a supervision challenge that the company has never fully solved. When a brand runs nearly 10,000 locations, the gap between what corporate standards say should happen and what is actually happening inside an individual store on an individual morning is a gap that inspection reports keep finding in uncomfortable ways. Most people who stop at Dunkin on their way to work are thinking about their order and their morning and the fact that the line is moving faster than they expected. They are not thinking about when the espresso machine was last properly cleaned or what the inspector found the last time they visited that particular location. After looking at what those inspections have actually turned up, it becomes much harder to stop at the counter and simply not think about it. Jersey Mike's There is a sandwich shop that most people outside the Northeast did not know existed 15 years ago. No drive-thru, no cartoon mascot, no decades of television advertising burned into the cultural memory the way the bigger names on this list have been. Jersey Mike's built its reputation the slow way, one location at a time, one customer at a time, on the actual quality of what it was putting on the counter every single day. And in 2026, that approach produced something that none of the chains higher up on this list have ever managed to achieve. Jersey Mike's was ranked the #1 fast food chain in America by the American Customer Satisfaction Index, with a score of 84 out of 100. That score did not come from a marketing campaign. It came from 14,464 customers who were asked directly about their experience and responded in a way that pushed Jersey Mike's above every other chain in the country, including Chick-fil-A, which had held the top position for 11 consecutive years. The inspection record matches the reputation. A North Carolina location received a perfect 100% sanitation grade in June 2026. The ingredients are fresh and made to order at every location. There are no heat lamps holding food that was prepared hours ago. There are no frozen patties being reheated behind a counter that gets wiped down once a shift. What Jersey Mike's has built is not a fast food brand in the traditional sense. It is an operation that decided the product and the cleanliness of the environment it was served in actually mattered more than the size of the advertising budget. In an industry where the gap between what chains promise in their marketing and what health inspectors find in their kitchens has become one of the defining stories of the last decade, Jersey Mike's stands out precisely because that gap barely exists. The #1 ranking is not a surprise to anyone who has been paying attention. It is simply the score catching up with the reality that the customers already knew. Chick-fil-A has held a position at or near the top of American customer satisfaction rankings for more than a decade, and the reasons for that position have very little to do with luck or marketing spend, and almost everything to do with the way the company has chosen to operate its locations from the ground up. The chicken sandwich that started one of the most genuinely passionate fast food loyalties in the country is part of the story. But the deeper story is about the standards that every Chick-fil-A location is held to regardless of where it is located or who is operating it. The chain consistently produces some of the cleanest inspection records of any major fast food brand in the country. Violations when they occur are typically minor and are corrected on the spot during the inspection visit itself, rather than showing up as repeat findings across multiple visits at the same location. The dining rooms are cleaned with a frequency that customers notice and comment on without being prompted. The staff interactions have become one of the most talked about elements of the brand experience, not because they are scripted in an obvious way, but because the culture of the operation produces a consistency that is genuinely unusual in an industry where turnover is high and training is often minimal. Chick-fil-A also operates on a closed Sunday model that gives every location one full day each week for deep cleaning, maintenance, and preparation that most other chains never build into their operating schedule. Whether that was the original intention behind the Sunday closure or not, the operational benefit is real and measurable. What Chick-fil-A has built over decades is a chain where the experience inside the restaurant consistently matches what the brand promises from the outside. In an industry where that alignment is rarer than most customers realize, the consistency Chick-fil-A delivers week after week across thousands of locations is the thing that keeps it near the top of every ranking that actually measures what customers experience rather than what brands spend on advertising. In-N-Out Burger has never tried to be everywhere. That decision alone separates it from almost every other major fast food brand in the country, and it is not a small distinction. While chains like Subway and Dunkin were racing to put a location on every available corner, In-N-Out was doing the opposite. Keeping the menu short, keeping the supply chain tight, keeping every location within a manageable distance of its distribution network, so that the fresh, never-frozen beef the chain has always promised could actually be delivered and maintained at the standard the brand was built on. The result is one of the cleanest operational records in American fast food. In-N-Out locations are USDA inspected, and the chain has maintained a reputation for kitchen cleanliness and food safety that the inspection records consistently support. The menu has barely changed in decades, and that simplicity is not laziness. It is a deliberate operational choice that reduces the number of variables that can go wrong between the moment an ingredient arrives at the back door and the moment the food reaches the customer. A short menu means a tighter kitchen. A tighter kitchen means fewer opportunities for the kind of cross-contamination and improper storage that keeps showing up in the inspection records of chains trying to manage 50 different ingredients across a sprawling menu in a space that was never designed to handle that kind of complexity. In-N-Out does not have a loyalty app. It does not have a seasonal limited-time offer designed to drive social media engagement. What it has is a burger that has been made the same careful way for decades in kitchens that the inspection records consistently show are being maintained at a standard that most of the industry has never come close to matching. The lines that wrap around the building at every In-N-Out location in the country are not there because of advertising. They are there because the product earns them every single time. Culver's started in Sauk City, Wisconsin in 1984 with a single restaurant and a Butterburger that the founders believed was worth building a company around. 40 years later, the chain has grown to nearly 1,000 locations across the country, and it has done something that almost no other fast food brand of its size has managed to do along the way. It has grown without losing the thing that made it worth visiting in the first place. The inspection record that Culver's has built across its locations is one of the strongest in the industry. Multiple recent inspections have returned 0 priority violations. 0. In an industry where the inspection records of the biggest chains read like a catalog of recurring failures, the consistency Culver's delivers across its locations is genuinely remarkable. QSR Magazine noted in 2025 that of the nearly 1,000 Culver's locations that began the year, only a single one ceased operations, and no reason suggesting any kind of systemic failure was given. The Butter Burger is made with fresh, never frozen beef. The cheese curds are made fresh daily and served within hours of being delivered. The custard is made in small batches throughout the day, rather than being held under a heat lamp or in a warming drawer for hours at a time. Every one of those choices is an operational decision that reflects a company paying genuine attention to what ends up in front of the customer. Culver's does not have the national name recognition of the chains at the top of this list. It does not have the marketing budget or the cultural footprint of brands that have been running television commercials since before most of its current customers were born. What it has is a record. A 40-year record of building locations carefully, maintaining them consistently, and delivering a product that the inspection reports and the customer satisfaction rankings keep confirming is exactly what the brand says it is. In a list full of chains that look very different up close than they do from the drive-through lane, Culver's is the one that looks better. Looking at all 12 of these fast food chains together, the most interesting thing is not the violations or the outbreaks, it is the gap. The gap between what these brands spend billions convincing you to believe and what a health inspector actually finds when they show up unannounced. The 4 chains at the end of this list did not make it there by accident. They made it there by actually caring about what happens behind the counter when nobody is watching. Which one of these chains surprised you the most? Drop it in the comments below.